I'm trying to add more B-roll into them. So I'll do like sitting, and then once I've done all them like in that position, then I'll move the camera around and do like little B-roll bits. But
it's always good to like take them after.
Yeah, and once you got like a lot of content together, you can use a lot of the B-roll from other stuff. Like, especially if you got training footage, it's like if you're talking about a glute bridge, you can just be like,
this. Yes.
This
Skills. It's all a practice. Tell me something good that's happened over the last week.
I got a couple of new clients, so that's exciting. Yeah. I feel bad for them though, because I'm like,
sorry, you froze on me. I don't know if that was me or you. Why do you feel bad for clients?
Yeah, I feel bad for them because I was like, I can't start you till July now because I have to get the rest of my websites done. You keep
well, at least you're honest with it. Really?
I know, we're good now.
We're good. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
This is what happens when we record on the other side of the world.
I know your good thing.
I
can say it for you. No, well, that, and I can say the other thing.
Which one?
The prep coaching.
Yeah, that one's really excited. I think I'm more excited to talk or to express like the dance.
Yeah, so you look sexy.
Yeah. I felt like a clown. Like I felt so stiff, and I know how to dance. I used to dance when I was younger. I did like the ballet and all of that, but I'm like rigid and I'm so tight. And that's from like training, right? We go into the gym and we're like, no, strict form and strict. And that's why I want to do the dance classes is like, I need to like loosen up and I need to like get rid of my bones and be like boneless and then flow. So I'm excited to apply. We're doing them like 3 times a week. So I have another one this morning, which I'm excited for. But hopefully just like a few sessions will help me kind of like loosen up, and then very much hoping that transfers onto the stage. So we'll see.
I think you look great.
Thank you.
I've got a client. I actually just tried to film my first solo YouTube with her the other day at the gym, which was hard. Like it's not going to be as good because like you kind of just have to have the camera up on a tripod the whole time. Like you can't move around with it.
Yeah.
But she's a dancer, and so like she's so confident with her posing and walking in heels, and she's super flexible and stuff. So posing is not an issue for her. But what I was going to say, I can just imagine like if I was doing it, I'd be like, what tempo do you want this in?
Yeah.
Like I know you're telling me to get low, but what speed?
Yeah. How fast do I get low? And that's like where you just listen to the tempo of the music and you just like, you pick up on that. So like the music gives you the tempo, but it's like, looking or listening for the right kind of tempo. Usually it's like a 4 count for me. That's kind of what I notice. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But yeah, I love it. It's so much fun. I love dancing.
Isn't that how they count in dancing?
Yeah.
2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Yeah.
Yeah. It could always be like a 1, 2, 3 or something. I think a lot of it like depends on the song. But it was fun, and I like that song. I've never heard it before. It was a Bruno Mars one. Something good that happened? No, something poo-poo? I don't know if you saw my message this morning. I cried this morning. I woke up with so much anxiety for my check-in, and it's like funny how I'm like working on my posing, and now that I'm a posing coach, I'm so hard on like expectations and like not good enough. And it's like almost at the point where it's like crippling me. So I need to like let it out. Yeah, that's like poo-poo. So that right now I'm considering like my upper limit problem, and that's like, unless I break through this is going to be my limit. And if I keep saying I'm not good enough, I'm not going to be good enough. So I'm like, okay, this is my challenge. This is my barrier. How do I overcome this? How do I break through this? So I know that like probably this afternoon I'll be like fucking great at posing again.
Yeah. I'm going to grab my water before we get deep into it. Otherwise I'm going to dehydrate halfway through this. He's already grabbed his bone. You better be quiet with that. And he knows that I've got one hiding in the like pantry cupboard. So like he spends like his day just staring at the pantry cupboard.
Just waiting.
Yeah. The yesterday morning, you go.
I was going to say, what's your poo-poo today? What's your poo-poo this week?
I think it's just stress. So Court's very well aware of this. I have a platform that I manage all of my leads, my clients, all my conversations. I manage all of my onboarding systems. So like when you guys like kind of like apply or you download one of my lead gens, it goes through all this automation process. There's a bunch of follow-up emails, campaigns, and things like that. It ends up being like probably like 60 automations. There's probably like 25 web pages that need to be set up, and then integrating it all into like the email and calendar systems and making sure like all the tags are connected to the right person so that they go down the right pipeline. Well, silly me decided to redo that. And I hired someone to help me, but it's not that it's not so much a language barrier. It's like, dude, I've already told you this. Like, and you've gone and set it up the wrong way when I told you not to. And then that's when I was just like, nah, it's easier for me to do it myself because I'm so sick of like having anxiety at night that he's not setting it up correctly. So I was like, yeah.
The good thing about all of that is, of course, like it's easy for me to like see on the other side is one, you're learning a new skill. You're learning how to do it on your own. So if and when you need to make changes, you're like, hey, I know how to do that and I don't have to rely on somebody else, which means when you need to make changes later, it's easier and quicker. So you're learning like a new platform. You're learning how to do it on your own. And the great thing, like if you think about this from like a step back, is like you have this amazing system that's able to like automate messages. And like just thinking about how like advanced technology is, and you're like, are you fucking kidding me? Like stuff like that is so cool. Yes, it's completely overwhelming. You're like, why can't this be easier? But just being able to like have a system where you're like, when somebody signs up with me, I don't need to like manually call them or manually write them an email. You're like, I have a system for this. Like, that's cool.
But I already have the system for it. I'm just redoing
it. And you're making it better because you have high standards.
Yeah, right? Making it better, but also cheaper because so what I figured out was the platform that I'm going through now, they're called High Level. Now, High Level allows you to buy their systems, rebrand it, and then sell it to other people.
Right.
Does that make sense? So so I was paying like $300 US a month, but if I go directly through Go High Level, I'm paying $100.
Yeah. But then you have to redo it because it's not all done. But you're saving money in the end, and like saving an extra $200 a month. Like, do you remember a few months ago we were talking about like how your rent had changed, and like of course you had moved, but like that, like $200 a month, like that adds up. Right? Like that definitely makes a difference. So it's an investment. Consider it an investment.
I probably just chose a bad time to do it.
There's never a good time. Let's be honest. We're entrepreneurs and we always have shit to do.
Yeah. Hang on. I just need to. Okay. Let's get into it. Okay. What are we talking about? Training.
We're talking about training. Introduce yourself and who we are.
Give me a sec. This is Femme Radio. I'm Dazz.
And I'm Court, and we are redefining health. Please remember to always leave us a 5-star rating and review if you haven't done that already. I don't know if you need to leave us a review, but I think it's just a rating. But just like click on the 5 stars, make us happy, do that. Thank you. I'm so excited to talk about this chat. I know that you're definitely going to put some science into it, but also like personal opinions and like how we approach it, not just like with ourselves, but how we approach with our clients as well. So much of this is like, it depends, you know?
Yeah, I don't even know, like, I don't think it's so much like it depends as far as like maybe it's, if we're talking about nutrition, that's a little bit more like it depends. I think as far as like, because we're specifically focusing on like the best attributes towards hypertrophy. So like it's kind of like well, you can do this, but the better option would be to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So your first point was talking about what the training with intensity and what does it actually mean. So I'll let you kick that one off because that was your point.
Okay. I just make like little tiny notes, of course. So when I think of like training with intensity, it's like the physical effort, right? So like the output that you're putting in or you're putting out per set, making sure that every rep is connected. And by the end of every set, there's almost like nothing left to give. I feel like for me, and I guess it's a little bit different now, like how I approach this with my clients, because now I'm not really doing the lifestyle approach. I'm pushing more into like the prep environment. But for me, like if you can do more, do more. Like I always want to like push that and push that training intensity where you had mentioned like volume versus intensity. It's not like how many reps you can necessarily do, but it's how challenging each of those reps and that whole set is.
Yeah, so I think like I would argue that that doesn't really define intensity. I think intensity is like your perceived rate of effort. So like we could use RPE for it. It's like your perception of how much effort you're putting in. I think what you kind of described is more training to failure. So like training to that point where you feel like you've given everything that you can. Yeah. But at the same time, like when we look at, so my next point was looking at volume versus intensity. And I think that, yeah, training at a high intensity means that you need less volume, which means that you can train more because you can recover quicker between sessions. However, I do think that there's a time and place where it's necessary for someone to go for higher volume. So whether or not they kind of do this metabolic adaptation kind of phase, where, because if we're constantly training to failure or with that high intensity and low volume, there's going to be a point where just as far as like your breathing economy goes and how well you can recover in between reps and in between sets is going to be your bottleneck. So that's when exposing to someone to a higher frequency, so a higher amount of volume, maybe doing supersets or just doing higher rep ranges and stuff, and taking the pressure off the amount of intensity that they're doing, they're going to become more adapted to that so that when they go back towards that lower volume, they're going to have, I guess the only way I can explain it is better breathing mechanics. And I think that's a big thing that's kind of gotten lost in the bodybuilding realm, is because everyone's talking about training to failure and doing low volume and doing 1 or 2 sets and then like, you know, you're done for the day kind of thing. And that's all well and good, but there's a time and place where our cardiovascular fitness is limiting us from being able to progress further. And we know too that like the more intensity that you put into a set, the more blood flow you're going to get to that muscle, the harder it becomes to breathe. And you would know this to yourself, like as athletes, we kind of adapt these ways to change the rep. So it's sort of almost like creating, what do you call it? I can't think of the word. Momentum throughout the set, and not necessarily by bouncing off the machine, but we know where we need to speed up and slow down to make the movement a little bit easier for us and to get those extra reps in. But yeah, there's a point
like
where it's
we're like hacking through it, kind of.
Yeah, and that's all well and good, but I think like if we can be efficient in all rep ranges, that's going to be better anyway.
Yeah, I think alongside with that, even though we're not really talking about cardio, I think cardio is, I don't even know how to say it. Not that it's like underrated or overlooked or something, but like let's say we're in an off season, we're like, oh, maybe we don't want to do cardio because, or maybe this is more of a beginner thought, we don't want to do cardio because we want to save that as a protocol, but like we need that cardio because we need that for our training volume. And we need to, like, if we're on stage, we need to have that cardiovascular endurance to be able to hold poses and things, right? And even though it's a different kind of like endurance, but I do think we need to have that good like blood volume or heart rate capacity in order to not just improve in our training, but improve in our sport as well. I think all of that. Pardon?
So we're in agreement on that point.
Yes. And I think it's just like how I very much simplify things, and you bring
Yeah.
in the science of it. And that's what I love about our conversations.
Sometimes
You had asked
thinking
you had asked about does training frequency matter if the volume is equivalent? And one thing that I want to bring in is I always write down like my workouts and everything, and I always want to make sure that I'm beating the logbook like every single week at some capacity. And there was one prep, and I can't remember if it was last year or like a year and a half, like 2 years ago, where I was calculating my volume per training session. And there were so many like little calculations, but I love doing it. Like I love seeing that. But then eventually it gets to the point where like I'm chasing that number and it's like you're not on target. So I think training volume for, I'd say, Gen Pop is not necessarily something, if we do need to focus on it, it's something that like I feel like we need to hold the reins on it, you know?
So frequency is like how often you train each week. So a lot of people
Yes.
think that like your training volume, it doesn't matter how frequently you train as long as your training volume is equivalent. So whether or not you do, I don't know, like just for simple numbers, let's say you do 9 sets across say if you do like 10 sets across 5 workouts, or
Yeah.
5 sets across 2 workouts, it doesn't matter as long as training volume is equivalent. But I think that frequency does matter because each workout done properly causes muscle damage, and this interferes with your ability to stimulate hypertrophy in later workouts. So it happens for like 2 reasons. So firstly, the muscle damage itself reduces the ability for you to be able to generate mechanical tension, which is essentially effective reps and what stimulates growth. And then secondly, the inflammatory response that occurs in response to the muscle damage enters your bloodstream, and your brain, like, those days where you wake up and you're just like, fuck, I'm sore.
Yeah.
And that generates like this central nervous system fatigue, and that reduces your ability to produce maximum motor unit recruitment during high effort training sets. So it's almost like, I believe that psychology plays a huge role in how close to failure someone can train or what intensity they can train at, not just from their perceived rate of effort, but from how many times have you gone into the gym, you've got your headphones, you're thinking about something else that you got to do that day, your training partner's not there, you might have worn the wrong socks, I don't know, and you just don't have a really good workout. Whereas versus like, you've got your headphones, you've got your favorite music playing, you've got your favorite workout partner there, like you just automatically train better, regardless of like whether or not sleep, recovery, and that was equal. So I think like if you're waking up sore because of the other training session and you've got high frequency and you're trying to go into the gym the next session, then that's going to have a negative effect on your ability to be able to push to that close proximity of failure.
I agree.
And it can alter drastically depending on like multiple factors, such as like your exercise selection. So for example, like if I was doing a really heavy, back squats or RDLs in relation to maybe like leg presses or hip thrust, I'm probably going to be able to recover and do a high frequency of like the glute stuff rather than the really big compound movements. Or the ones that I'm able to overload a lot more, and like the stability of the movement. So again, like if we're looking at something like a back squat versus a leg press, we can probably recover a lot quicker from a leg press. And the respiratory demands of the movement, which is like what we kind of discussed earlier, and your perception of fatigue and how quickly you can build tolerance to that volume. So again, it's like, how many times have you had someone go, oh, like that was a super hard set, and you're like, dude, like the last rep looked the exact same as your first rep. Just because you're tired doesn't mean that you trained hard.
Yeah, I think oftentimes, and I think this is competitors as well, like this could go for anyone, that we look at, let's say somebody writes us a program and it's like, okay, I have 3 sets of 15, where it's like you start to subconsciously believe that you're going to be fatigued at 15 reps and you stop, right? And that's something like I've noticed. So in my own training program, I do have like rep ranges or set numbers, but if I can push more, I will totally do that. So there's a lot of like perception in terms of like where we think we're going to be tired and where we think we're going to fatigue. And it's like, okay, push a little bit more. And then also, yeah, how you were talking about how everyone recovers individually, not just like, physically, but like mentally as well. Like mentally recovering.
And that's the point. Like a high training frequency may be possible for some, but others just can't recover from it and therefore don't have as effective following workouts. And I guess the best way to kind of find out your training frequency is to monitor your progress across different kinds of frequency and volumes and find which one you make the most progress from. And then just stick to that. Like, I don't think we need to overcomplicate it and do it like, this kind of algorithm of how to figure out your training frequency. I think it's just about like trying different things for a good amount of time and seeing which ones you felt best on, not only just like within your training performance, but which ones like did you feel like you had more energy throughout the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and being able to enjoy it as well. Like, what kind of training frequency do you like to do? So talking about, you had asked, like, should you only train within your range of motion? What are your
active
thoughts?
Range of motion.
Active.
So I think there's this misnomer about training within active range of motion. I think it's the terminology. I think that people think that if you train outside your active range of motion, that you're going to cripple into a little ball and your joints are going to fall apart. And I think that if you're in like the leg press and the leg press starts folding over you like a taco, your glutes aren't just going to switch off. Like, they're not just going to stop working, and your bones like aren't going to dislocate at the hip. And I think too many people limit their progress from limiting their range of motion, particularly like with the new data that we have on training at lengthened ranges. If you're in a stable enough environment, I think that it could actually serve as a benefit to get exposure to those greater range of motions that you can't otherwise do in other movements. But, like you see your typical GP, you see your typical PT on the gym floor, and they'll be like, okay, well, on the leg press, how close can you get your knees to your shoulders? Okay, well, that's how low we're going on the squat. And it's like, no.
Not necessarily, yeah, because you're in a stable position.
Yeah, and I think like that's a good time to then challenge those lengthened ranges a little bit more and encourage them to, to the point where it's orthopedically sound, but also if you're new to that movement and you're a little bit novice to it and you're not used to experiencing those ranges, then just pull back the intensity a little bit and then build from there. But I think that it could do you very well. And I think that you'll be missing out on a lot of potential progress if you just go, this is my active range of motion. This is how far I can bring my knees to my chest. This is as well as I'm going.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I love that. And I also think even though you're talking about active range of motion, I think some people believe that full range of motion or this overextended range of motion is always best. And for me, for example, one thing I've noticed, I'm currently doing a leg press variation, more so for my quads, but I notice if I don't go in that full heels to my butt range of motion, I feel it in my quads a little bit more, just based on that position.
Yeah, see, I disagree with that a little bit because you're not getting into those lengthened ranges. And I think with the leg press, a lot of people talk about, I've got a video coming out about this. I've probably got a video coming out about everything.
Of everything.
You know how people say feet higher on the leg press for glutes and feet low on the leg press for quads or whatnot. Quads. And I'm just like, why don't you just put your feet where you can get the most range of motion at the hip and target everything? And if you're putting your feet up super high, you're not going to get that much range of motion at the hip. I don't see how that serves as a benefit for glutes. If you're putting your feet super low to target the quads, you're not getting as much knee flexion, and I don't understand how that's going to benefit the quads. As far as training through full range of motion, I think that that's generally a good way to go about things because you're going to get a good amount of return from it. But I think that especially for sports specific training, so I don't know, a rugby player on the field or something like that, I think that they should train in the range of motion that's going to be most applicable to their sport.
Yes.
I think if your goal is hypertrophy, I think I don't think that we should do all lengthened range. I think that you should do full range of motion and then maybe do a lengthened superset. where like just to extend the set a little bit more, just train that length and range, because that's going to fatigue last and you can get a few more reps, a little bit more tension across the muscle fibers there. But I think like that also serves as a reasoning as far as like if we're only training the length and range, we might be able to get a lot more volume in because we're not going to have such a high perception of fatigue. So that could be a good like little intensifier to finish your last set off with. But I think like generally speaking, full range of motion is a good way to go about things. And then depending on your sport or depending on your goal, you can use half range of motion, I guess, like lengthen ranges or shorten ranges, depending on what you're doing.
I agree with that. And that was something I was going to add, and that like for the most part, you should be training like full range of motion to get the shortened and lengthened positions. But then, yeah, if you were being sport specific, maybe there are certain, almost if you want to call them supplementary exercises or like the stuff that you do like later on, the accessory work to emphasize the certain area that you like really want to get.
Yeah. And then I don't even know like how much, because we're probably thinking about more like compound movements and things that are like working very bilaterally, like we're very balanced in the movement. Whereas like I think with more sport specific stuff, I don't see how well that stuff transfers over to their sport. Like you're probably better off doing unilateral movements where it becomes a little bit more difficult to go, okay, you're only going to do like the short and length and ranged in this one leg standing hoo-ha thing. Like it probably doesn't apply to them as much, but also the goal for them should be like injury prevention. So like where's your bottleneck when you're on the field that's going to kind of like be most likely to cause you an injury down the track, and what are we neglecting, or what is getting overworked on the field, and then how can we mitigate that within the gym. But also like, so like say for, I don't know, let's just go to the rugby player again. Like they have a lot of like maybe eccentric loading. So it's like, okay, well then how can we either concentrate more on concentric movements to kind of like balance that out a little bit and have something that isn't so eccentrically loaded. But also like, how good are you at changing directions? Because that's probably like what you need the most. Like maybe like a basketball player, it's like, maybe they just need to be better at pivoting.
Yes. Do you work with a lot of clients that aren't bodybuilders, like a lot of other sports?
No, I don't personally, but I've been mentored by a lot of people who work with high performing athletes, like the people that are getting signed for like the NRL and stuff like that.
What's the NRL?
That's like a rugby
National Rugby League. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I don't know that one. I played rugby in high school.
And like Hypertrophy is Australia.
Love it.
All right, best tempo for hypertrophy. So I put this one out there because I think that people almost over exaggerate this. So yes, like, okay, so through the concentric portion of the movement, you don't want to be slowing the weight. You want the weight to be slowing you down. And I think that we can both agree on that. Like we don't want to purposely be moving slow through the concentric portion. So that's not the topic of discussion. It's more through those eccentric phases. And I think people think that the more time under tension, the better. But I also don't think that we have much research to say like a 2-second eccentric is worse than like a 5-second eccentric. And so I kind of think about it when I'm talking to my clients. I'm like, just aim for a 4 count. I think a 4 count is like a safe zone to be in where we're not moving slow, that we're kind of like having that muscle switch off, so to speak. Like it's going to stop producing the stimulus. It's like almost doing like an ISO hold for so long. Like you know, like it's not going to hold up for that long. But I also think that going too fast is running a risk for injury. I think the only time like where it's really applicable to go longer than 4 seconds is if you're learning a new skill. So say if you're teaching someone how to squat, I think that there's great efficacy in going really slow through the eccentrics, pausing in that bottom position so that they get used to how their body feels and like to build up confidence in that movement. But I think like for the advanced trainer, it's like just do in between and then push hard, come back up.
Find like the sweet spot. I like to consider, I can't remember who said this, but it's ride the tension. So oftentimes, like what I like to do, let's say if it's like a leg extension where the movement is happening so fluidly that you're not getting like this force and then like relaxing, where you're almost, or I'll think about it like if I'm holding, like if I have a water bottle on top of like the weight, and it's like, how can I get it to move smoothly without like jerking and shaking around, especially like in the lowering part of the motions and stuff. And I think that's really important. But yeah, I like to apply different tempos for me, and obviously like for my clients as well. And sometimes it will change. So maybe one day I'm feeling it a little bit more. I'm like, oh, I really want to like hold on to this a little bit longer. And then just like really trying to squeeze that a little bit more. Like, what was your analogy with like squeezing the delts, the juice, like squeezing the juice out of them?
Maintain tension on them. But that's more because like it's a small muscle group that can switch off really easily. Sort of like training your rear delts. Like how often have you lost concentration when you train your rear delts and then you're like, oh, that's just my scapula's banging together.
Yeah.
That's not
I'm not actually using the muscle. One thing I just noted this, and I think we can throw it in here, is John Jewett had said something like don't train sloppy, where it's like controlling the weight and being able to like whatever, not necessarily whatever tempo works for you, but don't get sloppy with your reps. And maybe if you are getting sloppy, then that's when more tempo needs to be applied.
Yeah, and I do think that there's efficacy for what you said before about like not bottoming out and then using too much momentum. But then I also think that there's efficacy for using a little bit momentum.
Yes.
Particularly like if we're looking at something like a hack squat, like that tension's going to drop off like right down at the bottom. And then when you kind of get to that first 10%, that's when it's like hardest. So maybe to then get to that first 10%, it is worth using a little bit of momentum at the bottom. But and so maybe then, I don't know, like if you want to get really technical, maybe like the first 75% of your eccentric is like that 4 count, and then you quickly speed up and then you come back out and then you struggle. But I think that's just like, I think what you said about John Jewett is a really easy way to kind of just go, just don't do it shit.
Yeah.
Like, and you'll be fine.
Basically, don't train like a dick. I think doing like I guess like sloppier form there's a time and a place for it. And I think it's more so, not saying like this in a snooty or like egotistical kind of way, but I think you need to be almost more an advanced athlete or advanced like trainee to be able to know when sloppy training is allowed, like when you can start to use momentum and stuff and when it's actually benefiting you versus doing it for the sake of doing it and then whatever we want to call it, junk volume or whatever.
Yeah, and I think this goes for like pretty much everything that we'll be talking about today, because it's like we wouldn't be having these conversations with someone that just first walks into the gym. We'd be like, hey, how about we show up 3 times a week?
Yeah, at least. Yeah, and do it properly. Muscle soreness. Is it an effective measurement of progress? I honestly like never feel sore. Like never.
Yeah, no, so my point here was that it's not, because so the more volume that you do, the more likely it's going to cause delayed onset muscle soreness. And we also find that that doesn't correlate with hypertrophy. So for example, like the more volume that you're doing, you're not stimulating the hypertrophy response, particularly if we're looking at like 1 set versus 3 sets. 1 set, I think when you get to like 4 or 5 sets, you start seeing a little bit more of a hypertrophy response, but it's not very much that it's necessarily worth the fatigue that it's causing or the muscle damage that it's causing. The more volume that you do too, the more calcium ions that you build up, and those calcium ions compete for the proteins that are needed for the hypertrophy stimulus. So yeah, I just don't think that, like, given that, no muscle soreness. I think the only time muscle soreness is a good indicator of like maybe progress is when because we know that new movements will cause muscle soreness as well, like something that you're not used to. I think that that's a good feedback for you to go, okay, I hit the right muscle, but it shouldn't last every session.
Yeah, like, and once in a while I get really excited. So I'm sure the same thing for you is more or less like we follow the same program for like months and months and friggin' years, right? With like a little bit of variety in there. For me, at least, I've been following the same program for forever with like the slight variances, but I feel sore in my glutes from a workout I did 2 days ago. And I'm like, oh, that's different. So because I know I applied things a little bit differently. So I just take that as like a little form of data. And I'm like, okay, taking that and noting it.
I still get caught up in it too. Like if I get sore glutes, I'm like, yeah, like I had a good glute workout. And then like the next time I go, my glutes aren't sore. I'm like, did I miss something?
Did I even do anything?
Yeah, so I get the idea of being married to like kind of like just feeling it afterwards. And I think that's when it's important to track other measures of progress.
Yeah, one thing I get sometimes almost upset with is when I get sore, I'm like, am I not recovering well? Am I not eating enough protein? Or like, am I not eating, like repairing enough? Or am I not stretching enough afterwards? I almost get like upset when I feel this soreness. I'm like, oh my God, I'm under recovering, which isn't the case.
Did you want to go? You had a comment here about training with your ego. Did you want to go into that? Or do you want to go into misconceptions about RPE and reps and reserve? Because I know that goes onto your other one.
We can train with ego. I don't even know what to say. Like when is it okay? Training with your ego. I think there's a time and a place for it. I think bringing your ego into a session, every session is not helpful. But if you're doing something like you're trying to PR and there's like a purpose for it, I think having a little bit of an ego is important because that's what we need to kind of push us through.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that like the rage head in between sets isn't necessarily a good idea because it's like causing more fatigue. But that's just kind of like when I think of training with the ego, I kind of just think of those like raging heads in the gym that like, you know, rev themselves up when it's like, dude, you're meant to be resting right now.
Yeah. I think of training with your ego as just, I don't even want to say too much intensity, but chasing numbers. I think that's like a big thing with training with your ego. And that was kind of like a note that I had put in here. And I'm not going to mention like the group's name, but there's this well-known female-led fitness group. And do you know who I'm talking about?
No.
I don't think you would. And they're like a really big group and they focus on the weight and they share their PRs and everything with the group, which can be really empowering and really motivating. But I also feel like it's a numbers game, and you see other girls like hitting PRs and you're like, well, I'm not training with that weight. And then you feel like a bag of shit because you can't do it. So then you start bringing your ego in and then you start training with shitty form. And some of these leaders in this group are hitting PRs, but you look at them and you're like, the fuck are you doing? Like it's this partial range of motion. You're not even activating the muscle. You're just using momentum and it's just shit and sloppy. And I think that's training with your ego. And that's where we're doing it almost like for the social media likes or like the recognition rather than are you actually doing what you're supposed to be doing when you go into the gym?
Yeah, I agree.
RPE.
Can we go into misconceptions around RPE?
Yeah.
So you probably heard it, bodybuilders saying, I don't use RPE, man, I train to failure.
Yeah.
And it's almost like,
that's
dude,
kind of
that's
me
RPE.
too.
That's an RPE. But that's RPE. It's an RPE of 10.
I know.
Or like I train 1 rep in reserve and it's like, well, that's an RPE of 9. Like
it's the same. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like telling someone, hey, dude, did you know that you've been, I don't know, like breathing, I don't know, like oxygen this whole time? And they're like, no, I've just been breathing air. And it's like, yeah, it's fucking like oxygen. So it's like you know, the way that you think that you're training, you just don't understand what RPE means. Like it's just the scale of your perceived effort. And on the other side of things, when people that do use RPE, and I get frustrated when they say something like, oh, I just couldn't train at an RPE at 9 today. Like my CNS was fried or I had like adrenal fatigue. And it's like, yes, you fucking can. You can train to an RPE of 9 every day of the week and every hour of the day because it's your rate of perceived exertion. It's not.
And it's just going to feel different.
It's got nothing to do with the load on the bar. You could be lifting nothing and just be that fatigued and say, okay, my RP was 9 because I'm fucking fried. And so then like when, you know, like I had one client who was like, had heavy hack squats programmed, and instead of doing like the 2 heavy sets that they had, they were like, oh, I just was like tired. So I didn't want to do heavy. So I just did 3 lighter sets. And I'm like, well, why didn't you just not put as much load on the bar? Because essentially now what you've done is burnt the candle at both ends, because like you've increased your total tonnage for the day and just filled that glass back up.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think I think a lot of people associate a specific RPE with a certain exercise and the weight. It's like indefinitely, if I'm doing a leg press, my RPE 9 is going to be like 200 pounds. Like, and people associate that.
And some days you might be tired, and 100 pounds might be your RPE of 9.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't. I want to know from you specifically, if you are, let's say you're in competition, like in competition mode, and the goal is to build muscle. If you're feeling like shit, do you drop the weight, or are you just like, no, screw the RPE? I'm just going to go like and max out and make sure that you are progressing in a weight load every single session.
Drop the load, because otherwise you're just increasing your allostatic load. So I think like for some people, I actually tell them like to throw out the logbook. When I know they can train properly, I'm like, just throw out the logbook, because what I want you to do is I want you know what weight you did on the leg press last week. I want you to just like, I don't care if you don't count the reps. I just want you to keep going with the same tempo until you reach that close proximity of failure. Don't worry if it doesn't match what you did last week, because we're still working towards that close proximity of failure. Does that make sense? Like it shouldn't matter what's on the logbook. It should just matter about how much effort you're putting into the movement.
Yeah, and perceived effort. How do you measure RPE or RIR with clients?
I don't use it, to be honest. It's just like I just kind of understand this. I just kind of explain what I just explained to you to them in much gentler terms, and then I monitor their training videos throughout the week and make sure that we see that involuntary slowing throughout the concentric portion of the movement in the last rep in comparison to the first rep.
I get them to send me videos as well, and then I get them to tell me what their RPE is. I use RPE instead of RIR. I don't know why. I've just always done it that way, so I stick with that. But with that, so the client will tell me like, oh, this was an RPE 8. And I look at it, I'm like, that looks like a warm-up set, like half of a warm-up set. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, no, push more. So what a lot of people perceive as like their best effort, even like prep clients, sometimes like they think their best effort, and I'm like, put on more weight and do the same thing and tell me what you feel. And they're like, oh yeah, that was an RPE 8 or that was an RPE 9. It's like, well, you told me like half that weight last week was an RPE 9.
Yeah, I remember my friend Paul. Once he was training his sister, and his sister would tell him that she trained at like an RPE of 8 or something like that, and he was like, "We're gonna do a training session together." And then what he did was he put her in the squat rack, and when she was about to squat, he pulled out the safeties, and he's like, "You're just gonna keep going until you can't get back up." And then it's teaching her to be comfortable with failing, but 2, it's like, okay, and I did this with my client. I trained with her on Monday, and I said to her, she was on the hack squat, and I told her I wanted her to get 7 reps, and it got to 7, and I was like, do another 7. And she was like, she looked at me because she thought like that was her working weight. And I was like, do you realize that you've had double the reps that you've been able to do this whole time? And she's like, I don't feel comfortable like bottoming out and not being able to get back up. And I was like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen if that hack squat bottoms out? You're just going to crawl it out? Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. In a way, I listen to like the motivational hype messages like from Eric Thomas and all those people when I train at the gym, and they're like, go fucking harder, like all of that stuff. And there was one thing that someone said a couple days ago, and they're like, when you go into the gym, like if you're a bodybuilder, if you're competing, when you go into the gym, like you should go in not afraid, but like the point is like you need to go in there and push, and you need to challenge yourself. And like if you're going in and like, for lack of a better term, going through the range of motion or going through the motions and like feeling safe and confident with every single set, I don't think you're pushing yourself nearly hard enough. And like there should almost be like, not every set, you're not going to go to failure every set, but like you need to experience what failure is like in the gym and what it feels like to bottom out, and it feels like to fail on a last set or last rep, like, and do it safely. Obviously, like we're not looking for someone to like fall when they're doing a back squat, like a back squat, but if you're doing like a leg press, like see how much you can do. That's so let's transition into like protocols that we use, because this would be something that I like to do for clients, or I'll do sometimes for me. I'll do a last set AMRAP. So your last set, do as many reps as possible. And I will usually, for some clients, I will give them like, be like, okay, your last set, you're going to do an extra 5 reps. And you see them do that, and you're like, yeah, you can do way more.
Yeah, I like the idea of doing that. I was more intending on approaching this section of the chat with Fck Marry K, like out of the intensifiers. So like, let's say drop sets, cluster sets, myo sets, or supersets. Fck Marry K.
Which 3?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
So cluster sets or myo sets, they're the same thing.
Yeah.
Drop sets or supersets. Do you want me to go?
Go first.
Because I have my answer. Because I wrote the question.
Like fixed.
So I think like from a hypertrophy perspective, cluster sets or myo sets are probably going to be most efficient, because like we can maintain the same amount of load and just extend the set longer. So like say with myo reps, you rest for, I think it's like 4 seconds, try to get, and is it 30 seconds, then try again another 4 reps and keep repeating that until you can't get your 4 reps. And then I would probably go drop sets, particularly if I'm on a pin loaded machine, because it's very easy just to take out the pin and put it up, get a few more reps in. And then I'd go supersets, just because I think like supersets are really good for time efficiency. But I think that depending on how you're setting it up and how much rest you're allowing in between, it can lead diminishing returns on the secondary movement. However, keep an eye out, guys, because I've got another video coming out on supersets and where they might, like, how you can get more out.
Of course we do.
But I think ultimately it just comes down to which is going to suck the least. Like, for example, doing a cluster set on a hack squat, not on a hack squat, on a barbell back squat. Are you really going to do a cluster set, or are you just going to take an extra breath or something and then do a few more reps? Like, I don't think that that's a safe environment to kind of do a cluster set.
Yeah.
I think it's like, as far as a drop set goes, unless you've got like your NASCAR kind of like training buddies next to you ready to strip the weight plates off, it's not really. You're not going to get off the machine and unstrip both sides and then hop back on. Like you're diminishing the idea of the whole thing. So I think like if you're on a pin loaded machine, well then drop sets will probably be my first choice. I think like if you're on a like doing a back squat, I don't know, maybe superset if I had to choose one, just because then like you're not increasing your risk of injury on the back squat. And then, so I would go fuck cluster sets, marry drop sets, just because I think that they're very easy to perform on pin loaded machines. Or maybe the other way around. And then supersets I'd kill.
I feel the same. I feel like cluster reps, how I do them, I will do like, I've done it before where I'll do lateral raises. My coach had me doing this, like this was a couple of years ago, where it was lateral raises at the very end of like my whole training program. And it was like 2 sets of 50, and take like the little tiny little breaks in between as needed. Form can break down a little bit in order to get those 50 reps. I really like that. Again, like there's some exercises and some machines where it's safe to do that and proper and beneficial to do it. And then there's some where it's like just junk volume or whatever you want to call it. So I like those.
I think it's important, like, sort of what you said. Sorry, I think what you sort of said too about like where everything is in the gym is important too. Like particularly with supersets, that video that I did where you're doing like the dumbbell lateral raises and then a cable, very easy to set up. If you're doing something where it's like at the other side of the gym, that's annoying as fuck.
Don't even superset it. Like you're not going to get the benefit of the superset if you're like walking and going over there. That's like when I write programs for clients, I will almost always, if I'm doing a superset, it's either going to be 2 free weight movements or like a cable or a cable and a dumbbell or a machine and a dumbbell. So it's like they can easily bring that thing over and do that. So it's actually effective. Drop sets, I would marry. I think they're safe, but drop sets, I don't know. I have mixed feelings on drop sets. Like if you drop the weight because you hit fatigue, then it's not like overloading afterwards. Does that make sense?
No, because then you're dropping the weight, so you would still be able to rep some out. So it's still a good way to extend the set. It's almost like like the same with other sets. Like if you take it to failure, does that mean that you can't push any more out? No, not necessarily. It's like the way that I kind of think about this is like, you know, when you hop on a pin loaded machine, I did this the other day on the leg curl, and you just pick a weight that's like too heavy. And say if you're aiming for like reps of like 10 and you got to like 4 and you're like
3.
Oh fuck. And then it's like
then you drop the weight.
Yeah.
I feel like then at that point, I don't know. Drop sets are safe for me, but if I had a choice, I would just get rid of drop sets entirely. But I wouldn't kill them because I think I would kill supersets. I don't even do supersets in my programming other than I have biceps and quads that I superset because everything else I'm like, no way.
I think with drop sets, it comes down again to like what modality you're using. Like I said, like you wouldn't do it with like a back squat or something. But I also think that it's just going to come, like the one thing I hate when someone programs supersets is when they choose 2 unilateral movements. And it's like, wait, do I do like my left leg on that machine and then my left leg on that machine and then my right leg on the first machine and then my right leg on the second machine? Or do I do my left, right,
and then your next exercise, left, right? Yes.
Like,
always.
I don't understand that.
One of my, like totally random, but one of my training pet peeves, when I see a personal trainer superset a bilateral movement and then a unilateral movement.
Oh, see, I don't mind that so much, especially if they've, I get what you're saying.
If it's the similar muscle group.
Yeah. Rather than doing that AMRAPs, I hate doing AMRAPs. But what I do like doing is, say if I was like doing 2, I've got this in my program at the moment. So it's like a dumbbell lateral raises and then superset with a drop set of cable lateral raises. So I build to a top heavy set of dumbbell lateral raises, which like usually takes 3 sets to get to my progression. And then I just do 1 drop set on the cables.
I like that. I like implementing things like that.
I'm getting or even like, that 20, 15, 10, rather than doing like hit 100 reps. It's like, no, like make it more interesting, please.
Yeah. Sometimes I just like throwing in something like that, like a random fun protocol. Like it's just that little like stimulation that we need, the fancy flashy. Do you prefer training by yourself or with someone?
It depends on that someone.
Okay, I was going to say, and if it is with someone, who is it? It's me. Okay, who is your ideal gym partner?
I think it's got to be someone who is easy to talk to, but also knows like when I'm quiet, don't talk to me. Like if I'm thinking about when you're training with someone and you're like halfway through a set and they start a conversation with you and it's like, can you shut the fuck up?
I don't know because I do not do that.
Yeah. What about you?
If I would much rather train by myself, if I'm going to train with someone, to be honest, I would rather train with like a male bodybuilder, like a big ass guy that's going to like push me because I come from like this powerlifting background and I have like a little bit of an ego, and I like to feel like I'm much more jacked than I actually am. And I like to kind of show up and prove that I can hold my own. So if I'm going to train with someone, I would much rather train, or at least like with a female that's like, not that I don't want to train with bikini competitors, but I want to train with like a figure competitor or a wellness competitor. And if we're going to do wellness, like let's train legs.
I think
Like I want to push.
I don't think that's necessarily the reason why I like training with males. It's like, it's purely selfish that I know they'll put the weights away from me.
That's also nice too.
If they don't, they're a jerk.
That's the extra benefit. Yeah. You're like, why are we doing that? Do you want to wrap up, or do you want to talk about coming back after time off, or how you've kind of come back over the last like couple weeks or months?
Do you mind if we wrap up? I'm very tired.
We can totally, let's wrap up. Let's let Dazz go to bed. We do need to take a selfie. So we're going to smile right now. Wait. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to wrap that up. That is our episode today, episode number 16 with training. So that's it for this episode of Femme Radio.
Make sure that you're subscribed and connected with us for more discussions and empowering conversations that redefine your health.
Bye, friends.